Hi, my name is Sarah Domke, and I've known Evan Neumann for a very long time, nearly 30 years, and I'm doing this interview as a favor to him and his family. So, hi, Evan. Welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, it's my
Um, my,
pleasure. Go
my
ahead.
name is Evan Neumann, and I am uh, in Belarus right now because I was at the January 6th protests, and there were a lot of charges that were levied against me, and it came out while I was in Ukraine. And well, I'll go into later how that turned out. But right now, I have refugee status, political refugee in Belarus. And so I'm looking for uh, President Trump or his administration to dismiss with prejudice all of the charges against me relating to January 6th and take me off the no-fly list so I can actually come
Yes, yes. So we have a website where you can find
home.
this interview and others, as well as supporting documents and articles called Bring Heaven, bringevanhome.com. Um, and why don't you tell me a little bit about where you're from and who you are?
Okay. So I was born in Santa Rosa, California, and more recently I lived in San Francisco and Mill Valley. Um, and my father's a first generation immigrant. My mother's got deep roots in California. My father passed away in 2011, but my mother lives now in the Tahoe area. And for a living, I've been a bit of an entrepreneur, moving from one business to another. Um, Sometimes successful, sometimes not successful, but usually successful. So I've had a pretty um, blessed life in that way. Right now in Belarus, I am just opening a restaurant because I didn't know how things would turn out, and I can't be idle. So,
Great. Okay.
oh, and I should say something about my family.
Yeah.
I have two children, two teenage children, and they live in Northern California, and I miss them terribly. But we'll talk about it later. I do get to keep in regular contact with them.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. So, would you give me an overview of what has happened since you attended the January 6th protests at the Capitol?
That's a very big question. Um, so maybe let me start at why I was at the protest. And so, and I'm going to start even further back than that. In 2016, I was a Bernie bro, and I liked Bernie Sanders. Um, but then with that whole super delegates thing, the DNC kind of stole that from Bernie, or maybe not stole it from him, but didn't give him a chance to uh, in a fair way compete in the election. And I didn't like that about the DNC and the Democrats of the time. And so I felt like Hillary was not a legitimate uh, that she wasn't legitimate in the way she won the primary. And so I wasn't going to vote for anybody. But then in the few weeks before the election, I saw the press was really vilifying Trump and saying, "Oh, he's Hitler and he's going to start a nuclear war." And I knew Trump. All Americans know Trump because he's been big in the psyche of America for generations now. And I knew that he might be um, rude and inelegant, but he wasn't going to start a world war or something like that. So I decided that because of that full court press, first by the DNC and then by the media and mainstream media at least, I voted for Trump in 2016, and then I was very happy with the way things went. And in 2020, again, I was still the Democrat, and so I voted for Bernie Sanders again. And again, the DNC kind of stole it from Bernie by encouraging the people who were similar to Bernie to stay in the race before Super Tuesday, and encouraging the people who were similar to Biden to drop out. That way, Biden would get all of the votes, and the votes on Bernie's side would be split between all of his rivals. And so again, Biden won, but I felt like again that was illegitimate. And so I was probably going to vote for Trump in the election anyway, but then I was really for it. And moreover, around February 13 of 2020, I started a business that was selling electronic purses that sort of glowed. And so my concept was that this was a purse that uh, you couldn't sell on the internet, and you had to actually sell through boutiques. And the idea being that it would be in some small way keeping boutiques open. But then COVID hit, and they shut down all the boutiques. And then Black Lives Matter hit, and they burned down all the boutiques. So you were allowed to steal the purses, but you weren't allowed to buy the purses. And I viewed both of those actions, both COVID and Black Lives Matter, as potentially uh, social manipulation by the powers that be. And I didn't feel like either of those were purely organic in nature, meaning that the response to COVID, uh, let alone where it came from, but the response to COVID was to lock everything down. I don't think that was founded in science. I think that was founded in a political ideology. And again, with Black Lives Matter, by people like Nancy Pelosi, who ironically was my representative, but also others, encouraging the Black Lives Matter protests and saying, it needs to be violent, and you need to be seen by demonstrating it in a violent way. I think that though that so not that Black Lives Matter itself, but how the mainstream media and the politicians amplified Black Lives Matter and justified it. Again, I felt it was a political thing.
The
And
violence.
then, yeah, the violence and how they justified the violence, and where they didn't prosecute people. Like I think if you look at the White House on May 31st, 2020, uh, with fewer protesters, more police were injured than on at the Capitol protest on January 6th. So when Black Lives Matter protested at the White House, they like burned the White House church, burned down some tertiary sheds at the White House, and assaulted the police. And yet, as I understand it, and it's very hard to find this, any charges that were filed, and I think there were only four, were later dropped. And yet, as many police were injured as during the January 6th protest. It came down to only how the media portrayed it and how the law enforcement agencies pursued it. It wasn't that the events were very different. It's how these things were pursued and portrayed. In America, we say, okay, well, we have elections to change laws that we don't like or to change how the executive branch um, pursues those laws. So then we had the election. And on election night, first of all, with the COVID thing and the vote by mail, that was all very shady. But then on election night, we all watched as behind closed doors and in secret, they counted votes that all of a sudden swung the election from Trump to Biden in a matter of a 2-hour period. And whether or not it was dishonest, whether or not it was fraudulent, is immaterial because I don't have evidence one way or the other, but it certainly looked like it was fraudulent.
Yeah.
And then when it went to the courts, most of the court cases were thrown out for standing, meaning that they said, oh, you don't have the right to sue for this, or you're too late, you're too early. There were a lot of different reasons, but like in 2000, when Bush v. Gore happened, we all saw all the evidence in court, and they like showed up the voting stubs with the hanging chads, and we all understood exactly what was going on. And even if we didn't agree with the Supreme Court ruling, or the state Supreme Court ruling in that case of Florida, at least we understood the evidence. But this time around, we didn't, because the courts largely didn't even hear the arguments. So I felt the need to go on January 6th and protest, and that's why I went to the
It
protest.
impacted your business.
More than that, after it impacted my business, it put me in a position where I had to sell my house, and I lived in a rich area, and my children were gonna, I had 50% custody of my children. And if I sold my house, I was gonna have to leave the area and I would lose that 50% custody of my children. I would go into some kind of once every 2 weeks kind of thing, weekend every 2 weeks or something like that. And so I was losing my house, I was losing my business, I was losing my children. It was pretty desperate. And
Yeah.
there was I could see no uh, justice in any direction for
So
this.
that's why it made sense to you to go to this protest on January 6th, 2021.
Yeah. And I've been to other protests, typically on the Democrat side. But this was the one that was most important to me because it was very personal to me.
What did you imagine that was going to be like? And then what was it actually like?
Um, I imagine so it's interesting. I imagined more people. So when I got there, I was disappointed. There was a lot of people, maybe 400 or half a million people, 400,000 or half a million. But in order to have the impact that it needed to have, it needed to be sort of that um, uh, the March on the Mall from Martin Luther King Jr. kind of thing, and it fell just short of that. On the other hand, it was a widely varying group of people from an ethnic standpoint. I was shocked at how many Southeast Asians, Vietnamese, Chinese, Indonesians were there, and Central Americans, a lot of Venezuelans, Guatemalans, Colombians. That was really interesting to me. I didn't expect that.
What I'd like to emphasize is that there were charges brought against you, and we're going to go into that more later. But that's essentially why we're doing this, because there were these false charges created against you. Yeah.
Yeah, some false, some true. So you
We'll
know,
see here.
that's what makes it hard to disambiguate.
So what did you see when you were there?
Um, so first I was at the ellipse, watching Trump speak, but I left early because I knew that the vote was happening at 1 o'clock at the Capitol building, and Trump was late to the speech as a busy politician often is. So I walked down before most of the rest of the people did. When I got to the Capitol building, that was pretty active already. Um, when I walked up to the police line, there weren't very many people, about equal number of police and protesters, maybe a little bit more protesters. But the police were already using a lot of tear gas. And not on me, but that was more towards the center. I was more towards the south of the west wing of the west side of the Capitol. And I walked up where I was standing in the beginning was on the top stair of a flight of short flight of stairs, and then there was a metal barricade, and then behind that metal barricade was the police. Um, the police told me that other protesters were using flagpoles to hit the police and spraying mace back at the police. I didn't see that, but that's what the police were telling me when I was up there, and because I was challenging them as to why they're being so
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what did you think?
aggressive. um, I was surprised that. Well, I went there early, so I don't know. I did not intend to be at the front of the line, and so the fact that there were not very many people there yet because most of the people were still watching the president. That was a little bit surprising to me. Um, and uh, what did I think? I don't know. That's an interesting question. At first, it was very conversational, but the longer I stayed there, the more angry I became, and I wish I hadn't become so angry.
Why did you become angry? What was going on there?
Um, uh, the way the police were handling it. So there was one police officer in particular that was talking to me fairly calmly, but then others who were more aggressive behind her. And though it wasn't her responsibility, uh, she, how do I say this? She wasn't um, seeming to hear why I was there. And I don't know. I think it's maybe that's part of the crowd psychosis that you hear about, where people just become in groups, they become more riled up. And
Hmm.
I think that that's genuinely could have been what it was, is that I was a victim to crowd psychosis to someone. Not to say I'm a victim, but
Yeah.
uh, that
You're,
that was it, that influenced me
hmm. And why do you regret getting angry?
because I yelled some things at her that I shouldn't, that I regret.
Oh, at the cop that was being calm with you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, albeit like not um
understanding. Yeah, calm but not understanding.
yeah,
And you know, she was in a no-win situation. All those police were.
yeah.
Because after I left, a crowd of like 80,000 people came up, right? And they were all just as angry. And they had like a couple of hundred police. It was
Mhm.
literally like a no-win situation.
And when you said when you left, what do you mean when you left you, that
So
area?
I was, yeah, when I left that area, so I was standing at the top of the steps, with a barricade immediately in front of me, and I think the barricade was at the top, so I was down one step, and so I was always kind of off balance. And some protester or agitator, I don't know what it was, down the line, at one point. So I started to yell at the woman, and some protester pulled the barricades down the stairs towards me, away from the police. And so I lodged my knee against the barricade to try to prevent it from being moved in either direction.
Mhm.
And then the policeman behind the woman that I was talking to most of the time yelled something like, get back, or something like that. And I said no. And so when I say I broke the law, that's an instance of me breaking the law. I didn't obey the lawful order of an officer.
Mhm.
Um, and sorry, I have to control my cat. Um,
Good luck.
then what's that?
Good luck
Yeah, yeah.
being a cat.
Cats are hard to control. Um, so then, but almost at the same time, then they sprayed me with pepper spray and hit me with a baton. And the man down the line, then I lost my balance when they did that. And I think that's when I threw my arm out, which is in one of my pictures of the indictment,
Yeah.
is when I have my arm out. But it's my left arm, and so if I'm going to throw a punch, it's not going to be with my left hand. It's going to be with my right hand. I don't. I'm not a good enough boxer to or a fighter to throw a left-handed punch.
So
Um,
this is like where your charges began, is what it sounds like.
yeah.
They say no, and then and that's is that the one legitimate one charging?
Actually, interestingly, that's not even a charge. Possibly the disorderly conduct. But I'm not clear on what exactly disorderly conduct is, to be honest.
Yeah.
In my in the first version of my indictment, they had uh, disobeying the lawful direction of an officer. In the second one, in the revised indictment, they didn't. They took that off, and it was just disorderly conduct. So perhaps that's the right one.
Okay. And I could see how in that context where it's like highly charged, it's kind of, yeah, it's hard to tell what end is up. So, and then this one in particular with the barricade was, and I know that you don't even know all the charges. They haven't released all of the charges against you. Is that correct?
Yeah, so here's the way it works is I don't know if they have.
Yeah.
They don't they don't tell me. So it could be that I have uh, no more charges, or it could be that there's many more charges. But they keep it sealed because they don't want to like go out and advertise, "Hey, we've got all these charges against you," and give you the chance to like run away or something. They want to catch you and then tell you why they caught you, which is reasonable. But yeah, it like the first
When you
I think
say,
it's the first seven charges are all about that.
okay,
That one tiny little
having
altercation.
you accusing you of striking officers and using the barricade as a weapon.
Yeah, so in the first set of charges, they said I used the barricade as as a deadly weapon. In the second set of charges, they took that off and they just had assaulting, resisting, or impeding certain officers. So and then civil disorder. And there's like I said, like seven charges. They're all civil disorder or assaulting, resisting, or impeding certain officers. So I don't know what they're calling assaulting, what they're calling impeding, what they're calling resisting. Um, it could be that some of those are legitimate, but in the first set of charges, they were very specific on what they were charging me with. And in the second set, it's very generic. So I can't really argue the second set of charges, whereas I can the first set of
And when you're saying they, who are you talking about?
charges.
They are
This
charging.
is the Attorney General,
Okay.
the Department of Justice.
Mhm. And you want to talk about your poster?
Yeah. Okay, let
Because
me pull it
I
up.
mean, reading the poster, it's very, I mean, yeah, you sound like a very dangerous person,
Yes.
according to that. And it's not as big as, the charges, as you say. Yeah, I just saw that last night for the first time and I was kind of blown away, really. I,
Yeah.
and also, would you talk about what that has done to your just like your own personal safety?
Yeah. So I can start with the I'll start with the bottom of the poster. They say I should be considered armed and dangerous. And that is a specific legal designation that allows police to use excessive force in pursuing me. So that's a shoot first, ask questions later kind of thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, they can shoot to kill me. That's the modern version of wanted dead or alive. But it also means that they have good reason to believe that I have a firearm in my possession and on my body most of the time, and that I'm willing to use it. Uh, so there's all kinds of things wrong with that. First of all, I've never used a firearm in aggression. Second of all, in Belarus, foreigners are not allowed to own firearms. If I had a gun in Belarus, I'd be in serious problem, serious trouble. And the FBI knows that, and so that's a disingenuous thing. They say that they believe that I'm in Belarus, and then they say that I should be considered armed and dangerous. They're just lying, and they're doing it to endanger my life and to make people like you and people in the press believe that I'm some kind of um, danger to society. So, and then earlier on the poster, that's where they still say that I used a metal barricade as a battering ram, whereas the only time that I was holding a metal barricade, there were many other people with their hands on the barricade, including police from both sides. So police and protesters were both holding this metal barricade. There were several of them strapped to each other. And when the barricades moved, they did not move towards the police. They moved backwards towards me and threw me down the steps. So I lost my balance and fell down the steps just after or while I was being sprayed with pepper spray.
Hmm.
So the idea of me using
Was taken with your fist out that they're saying was throwing a punch toward an officer.
yes, but then the only place where they say I contacted an officer is when my arm came back. And it is possible that incidentally my hand touched an officer, but it certainly wasn't as part of a strike. It was part of falling down the stairs,
Yeah.
where I was not in control, and the middle barricade moved backwards towards me, not forward. So when the police line was broken, and it was broken after I left, it's because the metal barricades were pulled down the stairs by other protesters down the line, like far away from me and away from the police. They weren't pushed into the police where the police backed off.
Yeah. Which
So
you
the
would
whole story is,
or use as a battering ram, right? That's like forward.
yeah, a battering ram is like, you're moving it forward, and they say I helped break the line of police in their press release, um, which is just completely misconstruing the story and how things actually went. So any video that they have of that would clearly show that that was the case.
I think everybody wants to know, did you go inside the Capitol?
Um, yes, I did. The doors were open from inside, and I have a video of that. And I'll show the video on this interview so that you can see it. Um, so the doors were open from inside. Before that happened, there was some guy who came. So this was on now the east side. After I got pepper sprayed, I walked away, and then I walked around to the east side. Then while I was standing outside the house chamber door on the east entrance, I took a video of a guy breaking the windows. And he was a very curious guy because he just broke the windows, invited us to go in, and then he walked away. And when I tried to find him on the FBI list of who was wanted and who was prosecuted for this, and he wasn't on there. So I suspect he was either FBI or somebody who, for whatever reason, was allowed to get away with his crime. So he must have. I consider that to be an agitator, but according to the MSM and mainstream media and the Justice Department, there were no agitators there. But I have a video of the man doing it, and I'll share that video first. After that happened, and nobody entered through the windows where we were, somebody else opened the doors from within, and I didn't see that happen. But then we were invited to go in. We were instructed to stay peaceful and not to touch anything, and to not to hurt anybody.
You didn't see what happened.
The doors opening.
Oh, the actual doors opening. Yeah.
Well, I saw the door opening, but it was away from me, so I didn't see who opened the door. It was kind of around the corner, so I saw the corner of the door opening from within, but I didn't see who opened the door.
Mhm.
But then we were instructed to go inside and be peaceful, so we did that.
Don't hurt anybody. It's open! It's open! Come on in! It's open! Be peaceable. Peaceable. Just please don't hurt anybody.
And inside everybody was exactly what I said. Well, no, not everybody. There was one guy who was out of control. He was like trying to kick doors in. But most of us were uh, hands in pockets kind of thing. Just walked in.
Okay, cool. Well, that was my next question. If there are any other charges you'd like to speak to and about what you think their evidence is.
So it's very hard to tell. So the first set of charges that they had against me, they were very clear on what they were charging me with. They had pictures. They said this is what he did. This is where he used the barricade as a deadly weapon, which is a metal barricade. I don't know how that could be used weapon. Maybe if I was one person, I held it over my head or something like that. But yeah, like He-Man, right? Like maybe.
You
But the case, yeah, that as it was, there were like dozens of people with their hands on the barricade, and no one person is manipulating the barricade at that point.
Well, and they were all attached, as you said, so it would be like
Yeah, it
be
wasn't
an effort collectively.
at best it would be a collective effort. But as I said, that the barricades didn't move towards the police as they allege against me, but rather they moved away from the police and pushed all the protesters like me down the stairs. We all lost our balance and fell away.
Yeah.
So um, there is one other thing. So a lot of these are disorderly conduct, and that is a very generic charge. One is that I threatened to murder members of Congress, and I can say absolutely I did not threaten to murder members of Congress. Um, they either have the wrong person, where they just mistook me for somebody
Maybe
else on video.
because you were there and there were people who did that, that was you, that you're guilty of that too.
I don't, yeah, well, I don't know. Like, I don't know where they got the idea,
Yeah.
but I know what my headspace was. And I don't think ever in my life I've wanted to murder members of Congress or thought that way. Um, but definitely not at that protest. My idea at that protest, my overriding intention was one of passive resistance. In other
Mhm.
words, I won't attack them, but I will stand my ground if attacked, meaning I will just stand there and allow them to attack me.
Yeah.
Because although that, again, it's not a legal distinction, because resisting is the same as assaulting by the law. But in my mind, there's a big difference between attacking somebody and uh, passive resistance.
Mhm. So why did you initially leave the US post January 6th?
Because I had no success in my business because of COVID, I wanted to do two things. First was to go to my manufacturer in Italy and review the manufacturing process. And the second was to go around Europe and to sell my purses to boutiques there. Um, Unfortunately, Europe was locked down even tighter than the US. It was totally insane.
Mm.
Totally insane.
Mhm. And were you running from the FBI at that point?
No, actually, the FBI stopped me in the airport and they interviewed me in the airport. I answered all their questions honestly, except for two or three questions when they asked, uh, did I go into the Capitol? Did I touch a police officer? And for those questions, I said I can't answer those under my Fifth Amendment right. And thank God for our Bill of Rights. They're not allowed to use that as evidence against you, the fact that you don't answer. Um, and so they did not have probable cause to arrest me. They let me go. And so, to the best of my knowledge, I was not being pursued by the FBI because they talked to me.
Yeah,
Like,
let you go.
they had every right to arrest me if that was the case.
Mhm. Why do you think they didn't arrest you? And then all this with the charges and everything.
Because at the time they didn't have probable cause. Um, at some point later, they issued a warrant for my arrest, and I believe it's because they corroborated the information, the answers that I gave them, and determined. I know they looked in like Facebook posts and saw the clothes that I was wearing I had had before, I had
Mhm.
worn before, and so then they had probable cause, and they issued a warrant for my arrest. But at the time they interviewed me, um, because I answered all their questions truthfully, except for the couple that were um, covered by the Fifth Amendment.
That you did
They,
not answer.
yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so you went to Europe, they let you go, and then what happened?
So after I was in Europe for about a month, I decided that my uh, purses weren't, I couldn't sell those in boutiques anywhere in the world, or at least not in any of the world that I knew well. So I had a friend who had a friend who had a rock quarry with very interesting rock in Ukraine. And so I went to visit him to look at the quarry and to try to sell his stone in the US through contacts that I had. And so I worked in that quarry or with the quarry for several months from around March 13 of 2021 to around sometime in June. That's when the FBI unsealed my indictment and asked the press for help. And the press, um, one of the people they interviewed was the family that bought my house when I sold it, and they said that I had signed the papers from Ukraine. And so then the FBI, I know this through other. I'll explain in a second. The FBI looked at the customs records to see if anything had been sent to any of my family in Ukraine, and I had sent something to somebody, and so then they had a city, and typically when you're doing extraditions or research for crimes, it's governed by treaty when you're doing international. And these treaties take a long time to implement. Not the treaty themselves, but I mean the investigation that is done through the treaty.
Yeah, like the
Um,
parameters of the treaty.
the what?
But like the parameters of the treaty?
Yeah, well, they have to. So it just takes. It's a very bureaucratic. So it starts out bureaucratic on the American side, and then once the State Department submits it to the Ukrainian State Department, um, then the Ukrainians have another several months usually. So typically these things take like a year or even longer, especially in a country like Ukraine that has a big bureaucracy. But for me, the what I think was the SBU, which is sort of the FBI version for Ukraine, uh, they came after me after only about 2 weeks from that article coming out, and they went first to talk to my shipping consultant, um, and then I had other warnings as well that I was being sought by the SBU, and because that happened so fast, that was a huge red flag for me that this was first of all political in nature because like when they go after murderers or money launderers or something like that, it goes through this normal like years long, months long, if not years long process. And for me, it was like 2 weeks um, before the Ukrainian police came after me. But then I made a range. So as soon as I knew that I was being sought from multiple different channels, I was notified, and I made a plan to take a taxi to Moldova, which is a country to the south west of Ukraine. And when I went to get the taxi, because the SBU still didn't know where I physically was, but they did know the businesses that I was working with. And so one of the people that they did know who I was working with, and they did know where they were, met me at a shopping center, and they were going to take me to a taxi out another. So I went in one door, she went in another door, and we are going to go out a third door to a taxi that was going to take me to Moldova. When we got there, she was being followed by some guys, and to confirm that we were being followed, we kind of took a circuitous route for like 30 minutes through the shopping center. And every time we rounded a corner, we looked down there. There's the two big guys, with cell phones.
And
They're-
that's the SBU. That was the
What's
SBU.
that?
And you presume
Yeah.
that was the SBU?
I think it was the SBU. It could have been another police agency, but typically that would be the SBU who would take care of that.
Mhm.
Um,
And they're doing
but
that on behalf of the FBI, you're saying? That like this process was expedited through the treaties for the SBU to be pursuing you on behalf of the FBI?
yes, so normally that's what would happen is it would go through a treaty. I think that this did not go through a treaty because it happened so fast. Usually when they go through the treaties, it's a longer process. But I think at that time Ukraine was really looking to get in good with America. And so I think that, somebody at the FBI picked up the phone, called somebody at the SBU and said, we really want this guy. Uh, go get him for us. And the Ukrainians were willing to do it. But that's supposition. I don't know exactly, I'm just guessing from the outside. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know that it probably wasn't a typical treaty extradition process.
Yeah, that it was bizarre. The
It was, yeah, it was remarkable.
Mhm.
It was remarkable for being an international uh, fact finding and then extradition process. These things take a lot. They're bureaucratic and they don't move in a matter of weeks. So when I confirmed that I was being followed, I left the person that I was with and went out the door that I came in because I told my driver to wait there for 1 hour and then he could leave. And so I went back out the same door and uh, walked to my car and then drove away. And the SBU didn't have any cars on that side of the parking, on that side of the shopping mall because they had been tailing the other person that I was with. Um, I then went to the bank, took out my passport, all of my money, only about $3,000, and walked to the edge of town and then took a taxi north. Everybody thought I was going southwest to Moldova, so I just instead went alone north and found on a map a little forest, a national forest, which ended up being a swamp. But I thought, yeah,
Okay,
and
well,
like I'm good at forests.
okay, this is like I think the most amazing part of your story. But before we move into that, I just want to I mean to me this story about being pursued by the SBU, this part of the story is what's like so mind-boggling to me as your friend because it's like wow, like what effort is being put in to, and I don't know a lot about other real international criminals, but I get the sense a lot of them are just out there. And just like how quickly they moved on this, like the strings that were pulled, the resources involved. And I also I was wondering actually just now when you were telling that part of the story if that had something to do with your charges being shifted, like being so specific and sounding so dangerous initially to justify all this effort, and then they were shifted to more vague things. I mean, it's probably all speculation, but I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. I could look at that in a lot of ways. I think that they probably went with charges that were easier to defend. In other words, they charged me with, for instance, using a deadly weapon and calling it a metal barricade that I, along with dozens of other people, had their hands on, and that probably wasn't going to fly in court. They probably weren't going to get that charge.
Well, that's one of them that they took the barricade off of there.
They no longer accuse me of carrying a deadly weapon.
It's
However,
on your
it could
poster,
be.
isn't it?
It's still on the poster, yeah.
They
Um,
didn't update the poster.
so that's the problem with being in my position is you don't know what their real charges are. This is just what they published,
Yeah.
which doesn't have to have any relation to do with what I will see in court.
Wow. But it's
So it
been used to justify pursuing you as if you are armed and dangerous and all that.
Yes, yeah. And so like armed, what am I carrying around a metal barricade? Is that what I mean? I don't know.
A concealed metal barricade.
A concealed metal barricade, right, right, right. That I'm gonna whip out at any moment
You
and
have
bludgeon
like
you to
some
death
crazy trench coat, like.
with. Yeah. So yeah, and I so I don't know like I don't know what their thinking is, and I hesitate to get into it because at that point, you told me earlier, uh, and you're right. You take a tour in conspiracies at that point when you
Yeah,
try to get into their mind,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so I don't know. You know, why did they come after me after only 2 weeks when it takes them months to go after terrorists? I don't know. I just know that it happened, and the fact that it happened indicated to me that I needed to take some immediate action to escape that pursuit
Yeah.
by the SBU. And so that's why when I went north, I ditched my computers, my phones. I didn't have any electronics on me at all, and I didn't even have a map or a compass. Um,
It's like a movie plot. Maybe one day there will be a movie. There's one more
yeah.
question I want to ask you before we shift into this, my favorite part of the story, which is what agencies do you believe were pursuing you?
In the Ukraine, in Ukraine, you mean?
Yeah, I mean in general, even or
Well,
even right now.
I know I was on Interpol. But Interpol doesn't have a police force, contrary to all the action movies that we see. Interpol is really just a way for border guards to access the police records of other countries. So if I'd crossed the border with my passport, my name would have come up, and I would have been arrested by any border guard that ran my passport. So I knew I couldn't go through a conventional border. Um, in Ukraine, I believe it was the SBU that came after me. The State Department almost certainly would have had to have been involved, the US State Department, the FBI. Um, and in Ukraine, it could have been the SBU or it could have been some other policing agency. I asked my associates in Ukraine actually just before we had this to verify who it was, and they didn't know, but they thought it was the SBU.
Okay. Um, okay, so let's hear about your journey to Belarus
Okay.
from the Ukraine.
So when I was in the bank, I uh, I changed my shirt and I had a beard kind of like this, and I shaved my face, changed my shirt, and then I walked out the back door of the bank and just walked through alleyways to the edge of town, bought a new jacket, even though it was the middle of summer. And I left my phone and electronics with my driver at the bank to be taken by somebody else so that because I don't know how they track people, and so the best thing to do is just to have nothing electronic on you whatsoever. I then talked my way into checking into hotels for a couple of nights as I was deciding how I was going to cross the border. And that's hard because usually you need ID in hotels, but I didn't want to give my ID because I didn't know if I was being actively sought. So I had to kind of sweet talk my way into hotels. And uh, then I looked on the maps uh, where there was like a national forest, and there was the Sochid Pripyat National Forest. And I thought that was the place where, even though it might be physically arduous to cross, uh, for that reason, there would be the lowest chance of encountering border guards.
Mm.
And so then took a taxi right to the closest place I could get to this um, forest, and I just got out and started to walk north. And I didn't have a compass, I didn't have a map, I didn't have anything that I should have had. And so I just used the sun and the moon and the stars for navigation. And one thing I found that is at dusk, it's really hard to tell what direction things are. But the clouds, the orange side of the clouds is going to be to the west, and the gray side of the clouds is going to be towards the east. So that's how I did it right around dusk. And then after dusk, the moon luckily was out. And then when the moon went down, I'd already gotten a good position on a good idea of where the Big Dipper was and Mars was out. So even after the moon went down, it took me, a couple of seconds, but I could still tell what direction I was going. Um, and I walked for about 20 hours through a swamp, and I mean a proper frickin' swamp.
Yeah.
Um, it was very difficult, and I never really uh, experienced swamps before. Mountains, glaciers. Um, I'm comfortable with all that kind of stuff. Redwood forests, all kinds of stuff I can do. But swamps was something new, and I was like covered in spider webs and uh, tons of like thousands of mosquito bites all over. Um, snakes. Oh, I at one point I like jumped off a log into a bog, and it's like quicksand. And like I at first I thought I was just like in mud, so I like put one foot down, try to lift the other one out. I realized, wait, I'm going deeper. Every time I moved, I went deeper into the thing. And so I just fell backwards onto the log that I jumped off of and kind of crawled out the log and then walked around. Um, and then there were like wild boar. Um, and when I finally I thought I was over the border, but then when I came out, it was still Ukrainian road signs. So I met some guy and he said, "Oh, you're going to be arrested if you're found here. This isn't Belarus. This is Ukraine. You're in the restricted area." And I said, "Oh, sorry, I'll go back where I was." And I quickly went back into the forest and kept going north. And I came to a sand road that they use for borders, and it was this long straight road. And I thought, okay, there's probably cameras somewhere down the road, and they're looking for people. And so I thought, if I roll across the road, they'll think I'm like a wild boar or a rabbit or something, right? So I tied a rope onto my backpack, and then I rolled across the road, and then I pulled my backpack after me.
Wow.
And
I would have not thought of any of this. That's what's so remarkable about it to me. It's like all the things you thought of.
well, yeah, like a person walking is a pretty obvious thing,
Yeah.
right? Like a human walking, like is very identifiable, even if you can't see their features. So I wanted to do something that wasn't that. And I crossed two of those roads, and then I kept walking. And by this time, I was out of water. I didn't have much food left. And around 1 o'clock or 1:30 at night, I came across some boys camping.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Tell me about the sky.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. So just before I
But you
came across,
take that to and like what that did for you.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so as I was after I got out of the forest on the Belarus side, there were some open fields, farming fields, and so there was no trees, and there was a completely clear sky that night. Tons of stars because Belarus, especially in the areas not near cities, have extremely clear skies, and so you could see the Milky Way, all kinds of stars. It was gorgeous,
Oh, really?
and
Is that just a breast thing where that it's overcast so often?
no, so it was a lucky night. And in the summer, it's often not overcast, although the winters are very gloomy in like Ukraine and Belarus and Poland and Russia. But in the summer, it's nicer. And because there's in the area that I was, there was no city lights. It was kind of like the Great Basin of Nevada, and there was just tons of stars out. And there was I didn't connect it, but there was the Perseid meteor showers. And so as I was walking in Belarus, there were all these meteor showers, and it felt like God was telling me I did the right thing. He gave me a little fireworks show
Yeah.
to confirm. But
Amid
I was
incredible hardship. I mean, you almost get pulled into a bog and
yeah, it was very interesting. Like I said, I'm more used to like mountains, not I'm a mountain man, not a swamp man. So it was great. And the fireworks and the meteor shower was really nice. It was on August 14th. And if you look it up, I think that's the Perseids. Anyway, it's one of the big meteor showers, and it just so happened to be that night. And that was really nice. And I was walking for a couple hours, maybe an hour or an hour and a half in those fields, and then I came across some boys camping, and they had a fire going, and they were, well, I probably shouldn't say because they were underage. I think they were underage, but no, I'll just say no, I won't say anything. I don't want to get those boys in trouble. But uh, so I met them, and they gave me something to drink. I'll say that, and uh, and then they called the police on me, but didn't tell me. And that ended up being the right thing. So the police at around 3 o'clock came driving up in their Buhanka, running out with their AK-47s with 100 round clips, and I asked them for politična pritulak, which is political amnesty, and they had heard from the boys that I was German, and they said, "You're German?" And I said, "No, I'm American." I gave them my American passport, and the guy that I gave it to treated it like a hot potato. He like dropped it on the table and took a couple of steps back and said, "Whoa, wait, I have to make a phone call." So,
not my out of my pay grade.
yeah, he was totally scared of it, and so he called some higher up, and they interviewed me on the phone a little bit, and then they said, "Okay, we're gonna take you to our offices." And they took me to one office where they gave me like some tea and maybe some biscuits or something, but not anything significant to eat. But this is now like 4 o'clock in the morning, and then they moved me again to another office in Pinsk, which is like a regional capital. But this is all in the state of Brest, which is it's a pretty large state in Belarus. And after they moved me to Pinsk, that's when I had a series of interviews with them, and they went on pretty much all day. So I was up like 36 hours doing interviews after I'd woken up the morning before. And the final interview was by a very clean, clean looking guy with perfect English. And uh, he challenged me on a lot of things and asked me about my politics. They thought at first I was like using drugs because I had scars on my arms, and I said, no, that's just from scratches in the forest. And they said, okay, we'll see. And so they actually posted. So while I was being detained for 2 days, they had two soldiers sitting there watching me, just sitting in the room, or sitting outside the room, but with the door open, just eyes on me 24 hours a day for 2 days.
Wow.
Like when I peed, they watched me pee. When I slept, they watched me sleep. When I ate, they watched me eat. They like were for 48 hours just watching me. And I think it's because they wanted to see if I was like gonna, have some kind of detox from drugs or something, because they were very nervous about that. Maybe they think all Americans are drug addicts. I don't know. But then they gave me. I actually got.
Well, I
Um,
mean, your story is so wild. So it's like, I just, I could see how they'd be like, all right, she
right.
crazy, it's on drugs. Like, let's just you know, cross those off before we start taking him seriously.
Right. Right. Although by that time there was already lots of articles, so they could just look at my passport, type my name into the internet,
Oh,
and
uh-huh.
verify my story.
Oh, okay.
Um, and then that night, uh, the FBI guy, the main No, the main KGB guy, because it's still called the KGB in Belarus. In Ukraine it's called the SBU. In Russia it's called the FSB, but Belarus stayed with their standard name KGB for their secret police. And the main KGB guy, who was pretty gruff with me the whole time, like you would imagine a KGB guy would be. He came into my
Only the archetype.
totally following the archetype. But he came into my room late at night, I don't even know what time, and said, I just got a text message from our president, Lukashenko, and it says, I have reviewed your file. I will not extradite you to America, and we will protect you. And then he gave me a big bear hug with a smile.
I love
Very, very like Belarusian or Russian or that, gruff. They're like, kind of standoffish at first, but once you're in, you're in. Like once you're, like
whether you want to be or not.
yeah, they'll give you hugs and like I go to the sauna now with my local friends, and we all sit around the sauna naked, beating each other with oak leaves. Like it's a very, very low personal space, personal boundaries here. Once you're friends, like before you're friends, it's extreme, the personal boundaries. But after you're friends, the personal barrier boundaries just go dissolve. So
fascinating. Oh. You had $3,000 with you, probably less by the time you got there.
yeah, it was down to about 1,000 because I had to pay taxis for like hundreds of miles. So that's not cheap.
How have you survived? Because you've
so
3 years, yeah? 3 years?
3.5 years.
3.5 years.
Almost 3.5 years. So when I first got here, actually a lot of first some Germans gave me clothes to wear because I only had the clothes on my back. I didn't have any. I had a blanket in my backpack, so I had a blankie and two pairs of underwear, 2 pairs of socks, a t-shirt and jeans, and my great boots. And so the government first told me I had to live just in the city of Brest, which is a great city, and I really like Brest. And when shortly after I got here, every day I would wash my clothes in the sink of the hotel that they had me checked into, and then
just hang out naked until they dried, or what?
Well, no, I had 2 pairs of underwear and 2 pairs of socks.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, like
every other day you'd be washing your things, and then they'd be dry, and then okay.
Yeah, and I went out. I think I had 2 t-shirts also. But I only had 1 pair of pants for quite a while. And yeah, and then I would just like overnight, I would wash it before I went to bed, and then just sleep in the bed and while stuff dried. And then I met some Germans, and they gave me my first clothes. And then I the government told me I had to get a job. And this is actually kind of a funny story. So I speak a little bit of Spanish, like I call it taco truck Spanish. And uh, so when the government woman, when my contact said she was, every week or so I would go into their office to find out what I had to do next in order to, because they gave me preliminary asylum, but then full asylum was 6 months later. And so I had to go into their office to find out what I had to do to get the full asylum. And so one time she said, at the nada that you get a job. And I said, oh, it's nothing, like nada, right? Like Spanish nada.
Yeah.
And she said, no, at the nada. And I said, okay, I don't have to, I won't, no problem. And she said, at the nada. And I said, okay, wait, let me translate that. So I'd use my translator app on my phone, and nada means required.
Oh, okay. Oops.
In Spanish, it's like it's nothing.
A taco truck.
Right. In Spanish, it's like nothing. And sometimes, when you're learning a new language, you kind of confuse the languages. And so that was a little bit of a funny story. So I had to get a job. And so at first I was like thinking, oh, I'll do like, pick up garbage on the street or something, because that's got to be an easy job to get. Not an easy job to get. so then I was going to be a delivery, deliver food for people. Also, I couldn't get that. Then I thought, okay, I'll be a software developer. Couldn't get that. And so I just walked into some English schools and I gave them my application. And I got a call almost immediately back from this guy. And he said, is your application real? Like, is your resume a real thing? And I said, yeah, that's all me. And he said, oh, you're hired. And I said, well, you should know that, there's some problems with me. It's not all roses. And so he said, okay, well, that's okay. You're not found guilty of anything, and the government has protected you, so you're good here.
Mm-hmm.
And then after about a year, I got a job that paid enough at an English school where I could actually live. And then I was doing that, and then this year I started to make my restaurant. So now I'm opening a restaurant. And I just found out it's supposed to open February 1st, which is like just after Trump's uh, comes into office. And so terrible timing. I should have started the restaurant much earlier, but I didn't know what business I could do in Belarus.
Would you like to talk about your restaurant at all?
Sure. So uh, a lot of my students, when I was teaching English, I would teach about American culture and foods and things like that. And my students would always ask about, more detailed questions about the foods. And so I thought, well, I'll just make a restaurant. And then all my students can you know, actually experience these American foods. Like I think meatloaf is going to be very popular with Belarusians. It's like a little bit bland. It mixes beef and pork. It's perfect for the Belarusian uh, kitchen.
Palette.
Yeah, the palate. Thank you. But that's why I really did the restaurant is because I tried to do a couple of other businesses, but I wasn't meshing with the Belarusian culture. And so a restaurant is like I can bring the American culture and I don't have to try to mesh with the Belarusian culture so
Yeah,
much.
you don't have to get that right.
Yeah.
Would you please tell us about milkshakes?
Milkshakes. So about what Belarusians think milkshakes are or what my milkshakes will be.
Yeah.
So usually when you go and you have a milkshake in Belarus, it's like milk and ice mixed together and you shake it up. And that's like a milkshake. Like a syrup and then you shake it. And
Very
so
logical.
it's very logical, but like what we consider milkshake, they consider a milk cocktail, morozhna cocktail. And so I bought one of the things for the restaurant is I bought a Waring milkshake mixer, so a good proper milkshake mixer, and they have excellent dairy products in Brest, like really great stuff. And it's really cheap, so I'm gonna have like the best milkshakes in the world.
Good. Sounds delicious. Okay, back to our topic. Thank you for indulging me on that. How has this impacted you and your family?
Really hard on my kids, and I'm sure it's hard on my ex-wife or ex-partner. I feel really bad about that. And both for my kids and for my ex-partner. Um, with my kids, I talk to them usually once or twice a week, and then I started to play video games with them because it's great. Like video games when you're absent is a really I'm very happy that we can play. Like I play Roblox with my daughter. In the beginning, I played with my son too, but then my son got older and he started to play first Fortnite, and I couldn't play Fortnite with him. He was like so much faster than me. It was like no fun for him. I was like a, a weight, to carry around. And then he started playing War Thunder, which is like a military game where you drive tanks and planes and ships, and you battle other players. And the first time I played it with him, I like was killed instantly. And then I tried again, I was killed instantly. So I decided I wanted to connect with my son. And so I started to play this on my own. and I got completely addicted to War Thunder. So I'm a total War Thunder junkie now. And but it's a lot of fun. I get to play with my kids, so it's kind of like playing ball or going hiking. You know, you really maintain that connection. It's not, you don't get the physical benefit of that, but it's been a great way to stay connected with my kids. Um, and I had, even though I don't have much money for myself, because it's very hard to move money from America to Belarus, I had a lot of money for my kids, and so I can still buy them nice presents and trips and things like that. Most of my family gets the SSS, you know, the four S's on their um, boarding passes to get extra searches when they travel internationally, when they're coming back to America, not when they're leaving.
Mhm.
Um, and I've had this report from most of the members of my family, even down to, like I said, out to nieces and nephews. So it's pretty extreme, um,
Yeah, it's
what
back
they're
to
doing.
like how many resources and energies being put into, you know.
Yeah, I mean they know, like they go back, they don't have like a database of where you fly. They have to research this. So they don't, like when you buy a ticket on United, it doesn't automatically go to the FBI. The FBI has to like use a warrant to call United and get this information. So this isn't easy information to collect. And yet they've collected it apparently on out to, you know, out to my nieces and nephews. So brother, sister, mother. Um, it's pretty crazy how, you know, they you know, they contacted the Ukrainians, and um, they used significant assets in Ukraine. I can say that. I didn't go into all of the things they did, but they had like um, electronics vans. I forgot what they're called. Not wire sharks. Stingrays. That's what it's called. It's a electronics van that intercepts all of the cell phone calls in a specific area.
Mm.
And I won't go into how we know they did that, but Ukraine doesn't have a lot of stingrays, and I know they have at least one because they use that against me.
They're like, bring in the stingray.
Yeah,
Evan Neumann on the loose.
yeah. Most FBI most wanted, right? Like,
That is just wild, that poster. Wow.
so I will say this: I did initially hope that my children would be able to come over and visit me. But in the intervening time, relations between Belarus and the United States and the West in general went way downhill, and that was just bad luck.
Yeah.
So my children, none of my family has been able to visit. A few of them considered doing it, but again, even without visiting, they were questioned by the Border Patrol. And what would happen if they had visited?
Yeah.
It probably would have been
Too high. Not worth it.
much worse.
Hmm. Would you like to say again what you want from the Trump administration?
Yeah, so what I would like from the Trump administration is uh, a dismissal with prejudice, which means they cannot be refiled,
Hmm.
of any charges relating to January 6th and the protests. So the charges that are about that date or about like uh, being a fugitive, um, or I don't know
Whatever else.
whatever else might come up because of that. I don't know. You know, you don't know what's charged against you usually. So dismissal of those charges, and then right now I'm on the no-fly list, because they said I'm a terrorist, and I have my pilot's license revoked, no, suspended, and I would like my pilot's license to be taken off suspension and to be taken off the no-fly list because I cannot enter. I can't fly. Well, I can take a ship to America, but that's a very inefficient way of coming home. So taken off the no-fly list, charges dismissed, and the arrest warrant rescinded, and then have that propagated on out to Interpol because um, I don't want to like cross the border and then be arrested and have it take a month or even months for them to figure out that there's actually no underlying charges anymore. It's just an Interpol warrant.
Yeah, because you can't fly out of Belarus. You have to leave Belarus to.
You can't, yeah, you can't buy a ticket from Belarus to America. You have to either take the bus through to Poland or Lithuania or fly from Belarus to Turkey. And then either way, once I cross the border into Turkey or into Poland or Lithuania, at that point, Interpol comes into effect. So it's not just that the charges need to be dismissed, but the warrants need to be rescinded
Mm-hmm.
and taken off the no-fly list.
Seems like a reasonable ask for all the effort they put in to get you on all those lists.
Yeah,
Like it
right.
seems it'd be reasonably simple in comparison.
Exactly. It should be much easier to take me off those lists than it was to put me on the lists.
Okay, so press contacts can be directed there.
Yes, bring Evan home at pm.me.
Yeah, more information is going to be at bringevanhome.com.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, thank you for telling your story. It's so remarkable. And I mean, I think it's one of the best stories I've ever heard. I know it's been super hard, so I don't mean to make light of that, but it's like your resilience and perseverance through it all is really impressive.
Thank you. It's been sometimes have been much harder than others, but like I said, I got a lot of help from strangers when I came to Brest. So that was very nice.
Yeah. And we're asking for more help from strangers to bring you home.
Yes. Donald Trump and his administration in particular.
Yeah.
President Trump and his administration.
Yeah, and anyone who wants to share this to just, get the message out there. I think it's important, beyond just like our personal interests to, just do what's right.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
You're so welcome.
Okay. Bye.